Reginald Scott here. Welcome to the video. Great to see you all again. Hope you're all doing really well today. And of course, if you enjoyed the video, please do me a massive favor and don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, share with a friend, all that good stuff. And of course, comment below. I do enjoy to read your opinions on every subject, and I will of course reply to all of you as well. So today's video was supposed to be titled chain waxing for lazy people, or chain waxing for cheap people, or cheap lazy people, because I am a cheap lazy person. I don't like spending money and I don't like to complicate my life that much. So that's what I aim to do with this video. Now, I made a video a long time ago saying that I would not be bothering to wax my chain for the following reasons. And of course, the pro waxing community got together in my comment section and said, no, you misunderstand this, that, and the other. You really need to wax your chain. It's absolutely the bee's knees. You should do it. And I thought, you know what, to be fair, let's give it a really good try, because I haven't done that. I need to investigate this for myself. So that's what I've done. Now, I'll be absolutely honest with you straight away. Yes, I've made my system in this video quite cheap. Okay, so I've made it pretty much as cheap as I can. There are a couple of areas where it could be a little bit cheaper, and I'll tell you that in the video, so you can do that yourself if you wish. And then as for the complexity of the system, I've tried to make it as simple as possible, as easy as possible, as lazy as possible. Unfortunately, what I discovered is that there is no real way to make chain waxing very simple. There's always going to be a lot of steps. And if you streamline or skip too many of those steps, you end up ruining the process. Okay, so you will get problems later on if you skip certain steps, or it just won't work and you'll have to go around and do it again. Okay, I got my information from a whole bunch of different sources. There's one particular person who people directed me towards, who's kind of cornered the market in all things hot waxing on YouTube. You know, full-time Australian, part-time K9 pest control specialist, AusCycle. But I wouldn't recommend him, not because he's not passionate about the subject, not because he doesn't know what he's talking about, because I think he does. Not because the information is not good, because I think some of it is. The issue I found with AusCycle, after watching 6 of his videos, was that I just got more confused the more I watched. The information, because he's been making waxing videos since the dawn of time, and he's got like there's about 400 waxing videos on YouTube, and I think 390 of them are his. If you just start watching his videos, you'll just get confused. It's information overload is what I'm trying to say. And a lot of it is conflicting information. He keeps changing his system. He keeps, adding things, removing things.
The fireman, the greengrocer, the butcher, the baker, they didn't know.
What I would recommend, and people are going to hate me for this because for some reason, a lot of people online hate this guy. I don't really get why people hate zero friction cycling. Not fully, anyway. I kind of get it, but I don't get it. Anyway, zero friction cycling. I'm not endorsing his business. I'm not endorsing his product. I'm not saying send him money or anything like that. That's all entirely up to you. But if you want to go to one location and get a really good overview on how to wax your chain, just go to his blog and read his blog start to finish. Okay, folks, so we have our old used wax chain here. We have our probe, so we can probe this thing like a farmer that nobody is ever going to believe. And this one has done over 300 kilometers since its last waxing. And if you look here, this is the piece of paper that this chain has been resting on after I removed it from my bike, and it is very dirty, as is this chain, as you can see. Let's look at the back side as well. Yeah, there's even more. So this stuff here is actually wax. I can scrape this off. Now the wax I'm using is white. It's completely white wax when it goes into my pot. And yet, the wax on this chain is black, completely black. And the chain itself it feels dirty. Like after you've been handling it, you can feel like fine grit or fine coarse powder in your hands, which is bits of sand or salt and other fine particles that are stuck to this chain. So, one of the first myths about wax chains is that they don't get dirty. That is, of course, not true. And it's an exaggeration when people tell you that wax chains don't get dirty. Sort of a half-truth, I suppose. Now, the theory behind wax and wax chaining is that because, number one, because wax is a solid, technically speaking, the idea is that things won't stick to it as easily as oil, for example. And of course, that is true. Particles are going to stick to oil much more easily than they are going to stick to a solid like wax. However, not strictly true, because even if you have a sheet of glass, right, like a piece of a window, that's perfectly clean, you've polished it with alcohol window spray, you've given it a good rub down with window cleaner, and then you take that perfectly clean piece of glass and you put it outside and you leave it there for an entire day. If you do that and come back later, you will be able to see very fine particles of sand and dust and dirt that have stuck themselves to that sheet of glass, because everything gets dirty, especially when you're out riding. So dirt will stick to anything, any surface that exists, dirt is going to stick to it. The next theory behind wax chaining or chain waxing is that if you look here, we've got a roller and there is a gap either side of the roller. I've actually taken one of the rollers out of this thing. So here we are, look, this is where one of those rollers fits. Here is the roller. And the idea is that when you put wax down inside this gap inside here, the wax sits between these two plates and it provides a little barrier which prevents dirt from getting down inside these gaps. And if dirt can't get down in between these gaps, it can't wear out the rollers, it can't damage the chain, it can't get between these two plates here because those gaps are filled with wax. That's the theory. In reality, that doesn't actually work. Yes, it provides a little bit of a barrier, especially when the chain is freshly waxed. But as soon as you start to break up the links when you put it on your bike, if you look here, you'll notice that it has to be able to bend like this, right? The chain has to be able to bend like this. In order for it to move freely and bend like this, there has to be a gap, okay? So there can't be some solid material in here, like glue or something, blocking that gap. So there is always going to be a gap. And if there's a gap, particles can get in there. The other thing about this chain is because it's being used on a road bike, road bikes usually have gears, right? You go up and down your gears on the front and the back. Okay, so you got your front derailleur, your rear derailleur, your cassette, your chain rings. Whether you have 2 or 3 or 1, doesn't matter. The chain still has to move. And if I do this here, look, see, the chain is bending slightly. You can see it more when the chain is long. See, look, that's the chain bending. That happens when you change gears. That bending motion over time, continuously bending, continuously moving along those gears and riding up and down on those cogs, that shakes all the wax out of the chain. Okay, as it bends like this, that wax gets squeezed out the gaps, and then it bends the other way and it squeezes the wax out the other way. And like I say, eventually the wax comes out the chain. And wax is soft, right? So if granules of dirt or bits of sand or whatever get down inside those gaps and they get between the two plates and there's wax in there, which of course there is, and the plates start bending and squeezing together like this as you change gears and as you ride, those particles of dirt get pushed into the soft wax. So you end up with wax impregnated with little bits of grit. There is wax in here, a little bit. There's a bit in the middle. There's a bit on the edge here. There's a bit on the inner plate. You can see the bearing surfaces where this roller rotates. You can see inside the roller, it's polished, where the roller has been running on those plates, on those little nubs here. And the bearing surfaces are all shiny, and in the middle is just dirty wax. Because the dirt that on the chain isn't just coming from the outside environment. The dirt is actually coming from a few different places. Number one, there may be dirt in your wax. If you've repeatedly used the same wax over and over again, some particles of dirt are going to find their way into that wax, right? The second thing is that as this chain moves, okay, along as you use it, of course, it's going to wear. Now, the wax is designed to prevent wear, acting as a lubricant, but I actually would say that oil is a more effective lubricant when oil is clean, okay, because the way oil spreads around a chain and stays in between the rollers is more effective, in my opinion, when the oil is clean. Whereas wax, it's stiffer, it's less, I would say it's less good as a lubricant. It doesn't spread, okay, it stays in position. So if some wax gets knocked out, okay, and you lose a little bit of wax in here, it won't get kind of recoated. Whereas with oil, even if oil drips out your chain, there's enough oil in there to keep circulating around and lubricating everything. As these rollers roll, as you've got these bearing surfaces moving against each other, this basically starts to become metal on metal. There's grit in here, there's dirt in here, rotating against this chain. And what eventually happens is you start to wear the chain. Of course, even wax chains wear out. So a lot of this blackened dirt is actually metal. It's powdered metal that's coming off the chain itself. And there's one more thing I've noticed as well that contaminates your wax as you use your chain, and that is paint. What am I talking about? Now, if you look at 105 nowadays, Ultegra, Dura Ace, SRAM Red, for example, all the leading group sets, Campy as well, they've all started painting their chain rings black. So that paint bits and fragments actually gets onto your chain as well. So that's another reason why the wax gets dirty. Zero Friction Dude says is only use new chains, never use an old chain that has been used with a different kind of lubricant, for example oil. Now, I didn't listen to that when I first started my experiments. I went away and I straight away got the chains that were already on my bike. I washed them really, really well, and I started waxing them. And immediately I ended up with chains that ended up very, very dirty. And no matter how well you think you've washed your chain or how many processes of washing you put through with your chain, you will never remove all the dirt from an oil-based lube from your chain. It's basically impossible. It will hide, it will find a way to hide in there. And then with the heating process of the waxing, you will displace that dirt. And so that dirt will then contaminate your wax, and you will end up with a chain that gets dirtier much faster. If you are going to wax your chain, I think the best chains to wax are chains like this, like Shimano chains. This kind of material, this kind of metal on the Shimano chains, on the 105 chain is the best because there's absolutely nothing between the wax and the metal to get in the way to prevent the wax from sticking to it. This BBB one comes with hollow pins and hollow outer plates, and this chain here from KMC comes with hollow pins, hollow outer plates, and hollow inner plates. And what happens is when you wax these lightweight chains, which I prefer to use and I was using previously with oil, all the wax fills up all these holes and all these plates, and you spend absolutely forever poking with a toothpick trying to clean out all the holes because you paid extra money for a lightweight chain, and now it's all full of wax. So you're actually adding weight to the chain with wax that gets stuck inside the holes. The minus of any kind of coated chain that's got a shiny metal surface like this, or a shiny metal surface like this, is again the wax doesn't stick to it very well. Whereas again the wax sticks really well to the basic uncoated 105 chain. The final thing you should avoid is this particular type of chain. What KMC have done is they've painted the in-between plates black. You can see where the black paint has come off those inner plates. That stuff is really annoying because again, with the heating process of waxing, that paint flakes off and it contaminates your paint, contaminates your wax. Okay folks, if you want to use my technique to wax your chain, you will need the following items. Firstly, you will need a chain. You will need some kind of metal container like this one with a lid, and you will need a piece of metal like this, like a headset spacer. This one is 20 millimeters, but you could cut it off a piece of metal tube. And you will need a cutlery holder like this, or a cutlery container. You can buy these in similar shops as this. And this one has had the bottom ground off it. It had a wider base on it, but now it fits inside here like that. I managed to find one shop in Brunei that does actually sell paraffin wax candles. These are only $2.20 Bruneian, so nice and cheap. A cheap thermometer. This one is an electric thermometer and it costs $2.90. An old toothbrush. some galvanized baling wire, some kind of metal baking tray or tray, some plastic sheeting, a funnel, a face mask, doesn't have to be this ugly, a glass jam jar with lid, an old rag or old piece of clothing, some washing up liquid or dish soap as it's sometimes called in some countries, methylated spirits or industrial spirits, this cost $2. Kerosene, this kerosene is dirty, you want clean kerosene. A plastic pot with a hole poked in it. A plastic container with a lid, like this one. A Russian-made Soviet-era pair of binoculars. A partially eaten piece of bread.
I think this is getting too silly.
Quite agree, quite agree. Silly, silly, silly. Right, get on with it. Get on with it.
Okay, now I'm going to show you what to do to a new chain in order to get it ready for waxing. Right, take your new chain, open the packet, take the quick links as well. Take your plastic container with the lid, open it, put the chain and the quick links inside. Okay, so now the chain and the quick links are in here. Add your kerosene, clean kerosene, not dirty like this, clean. Fill your kerosene up until it completely covers the chain and a little bit higher than that. You can go a quarter of the container or half the container, whatever works for you. Stick the lid on, screw it down tight, shake it vigorously for a couple of minutes, okay, in all different directions using different techniques, okay. Give it a really good shake. Put it to one side, leave it overnight with the kerosene and the chain in there. Obviously leave it somewhere that it's not going to fall into the wrong hands like kids or anything, and also leave it somewhere where it's not going to burst into flames. Maybe outside is a good idea. Once you've done that, you can open it up the next day, empty out the kerosene back into your container, and then you rinse the chain with water. After you've done that, you add soap. Put soap on top of the chain, put your lid back on, a little bit of water, shake it up, same again, a couple of minutes. Then empty out the contents. Okay, rinse with water, and then repeat the process. So kerosene, lid, shake, empty, water, rinse, then soap, then water, then shake, like that. So you have absolutely removed every trace of the original factory oil or grease that would be on that chain. Once you've done that and you're completely satisfied that it's pretty clean, dump out your chain onto a cloth or some paper, dry it as best you can. Then get your glass jar with its lid. Okay, it won't have a rag inside it. Okay, so glass jar with the lid. Now put your chain inside there. Not a new chain like this, but the chain you've already cleaned. Put that inside there and add your industrial spirits or your methylated spirits, denatured alcohol. Put the lid on and swirl it vigorously. Okay, don't shake, you don't need to shake, but just give it a good swirling. Open up the lid, empty out the methylated spirits back into your container. Dump out your chain. I usually dump it out into the lid, and then all that stuff is going to start evaporating, but get your old cloth or rag, put the chain into the cloth or rag and give it a good dry. Really dry out that chain. Once the chain feels completely dry and all the methylated spirits have evaporated, now your chain is ready for waxing. I'm going to be using a timer during this waxing process to see how long it actually takes. I will be pausing the timer when I have to relocate the camera equipment. First thing to do is go get a kettle to boil some water to wash off the old wax off my chain. Right, ready, set, go. So this is going to be a full kettle because I'm going to need plenty of hot water to melt that wax. I will be doing it into my sink. I don't recommend that you do it into your sink because that wax is going to block up your pipe work. If you do it at home, I'd recommend you do it outside so that you don't, clog your pipes up with cold wax. Here is our piece of baling wire hook that I've made, and here is my dirty chain. Everything is going to go onto this hook. That's fine. It just gives me something to hold it with, basically, so I don't burn my fingers. It can go in there for now. Okay, I'm still waiting for the kettle to boil, so in the meantime I'm going to set up the burner and start heating my wax. I made this for a previous project, so don't ask me how much it cost to make, but it's just because my burner is quite big, and if I put my heating pot on top, it will sit directly on the gas burner, so I need something to separate it out. So this is my pot, and here is the wax that I scraped off my previous chain out of all the little holes and gaps within the chain. So that goes on there. I keep the lid on while I'm warming it up, just helps it heat up a bit faster. There we go. I put that on a nice low heat. There we go, basically as low as possible so that the wax doesn't boil. I'm going to do about half the boiling water and then I'll give it a little scrub.
Wax on, wax off.
Carry on with the boiling water. Okay, I'm just going to take the lid off. As you can see, it's still not even slightly melted at the top, so put the lid back on. Check the gas. Yeah, the gas is still heating. I'm going to take this chain off the hook. You can see, even though I poured a bunch of hot wax, a bunch of hot water over it, these are still a little bit grubby. The hot water did not wash off all the dirty wax. So I'm going to try and dry off the chain now as best I can. I'll give it a little shake over the sink now it's cooled down. Now I can touch it. Let's give it a bit of a dry. If you don't dry the chain, what ends up happening is you get a load of water inside your wax, which, as I said, because I've got a spacer in the bottom here, I actually have a 20mm headset spacer in the bottom of this tank, this mug. That's not such a major issue, but you still don't want water in there if you can help it. Now that's dried up a bit, we're going to wind it up into a circle so that we can fit it inside this container here. I don't have a handle for it while I'm putting the chain in, so I can put my hand all the way in, but then afterwards I can attach this little handle here. Okay, wax is starting to become a little bit liquid, as you can see. So let's turn this into a nice hockey puck. So we're just turning it around in our fingers like this. You can measure it with the bottom of the can so you don't go too far, or the top of the can actually. There we go. You could use an old baked bean tin for this and just perforate some holes in it maybe, and another bigger bean tin for your actual container. You could make this obviously cheaper. So, and then, because there's not enough room to keep going, we have to create a second turn on top. Right, there we go. There's our little hockey puck. You just drop that down inside there like that. And then I'm going to place this on top, but before I do, I'll stick my handles on. Give that handle a bit of squeeze. So now I've got a handy handle for dunking the thing. I'm just going to rest that on top and let that wax continue to melt. And as the wax continues to melt, it will slowly lower itself down in there. And not forgetting these quick links. Some people say not to bother waxing the quick links because it makes them difficult to put on afterwards. That is true. Or they say just dip it in the wax afterwards. I can't be bothered to do that, so I just chuck them in as well. That way I'm not going to lose them. I know where they are. Let's see if we can check the temperature now. We can't really get the probe in yet. I'm going to use my very cheap thermometer, which has already developed a fault. As you can see, if I squeeze it, the numbers come back. If I let go, one of the numbers disappears. So even though we've reached correct temperature, the wax hasn't melted completely yet. Yeah, we're well over 70 degrees at the bottom of this container. So, but we still have a large hockey puck of wax inside. This is like watching paint dry, isn't it?
Well, just don't fall asleep. Sooner or later, something's gonna happen.
Okay, I just try to stay awake. It's just so boring.
Okay, I'm going to pause the video again and get back to you when the wax is completely melted. Okay, so the wax has reached temperature now where the chain is fully immersed in the wax. What I'm going to do now is stick the thermometer in and monitor the temperature. The gas is off, so there's no more new heat going into this thing. Like I say, it's immersed in the hot wax. What you do is you jiggle it around, basically oscillate the chain and make sure that all the air bubbles are coming out of the chain. You give it a little shake, and then you can just leave it there. And what you do is you monitor the temperature as the temperature comes down, and then when the temperature reaches just under 60 degrees Celsius, you pull it out. And then the wax should set inside the chain almost instantaneously. So we hit about 80 degrees. Actually, I just want to show you what the chain looks like in there. There is some bubbles and there is some detritus floating around in that. But obviously the dirtiest wax is going to be underneath. But if I just lift this up a second, you can see down in there, there's my headset spacer at the bottom. And that's just keeping it about 20 millimeters off the bottom. So like I say, hopefully the dirtiest, heaviest deposits are somewhere down here at the base. So we are now at 39 minutes and the temperature has reached about 60 degrees. So we'll wait a few seconds longer and we will pull this out. And with any luck, all of that wax in there should be trapped between the links of the chain. Okay, so I'm going to give it another little shake in there just to try and make sure that all the air bubbles are out. There we are. Okay, so there's my wax, looking a bit grubby. I'm going to filter the wax today and see how that goes. So I may reheat this wax now just to get it really liquid so I can pour it all out. And here is my chain. But my theory is that lying on its side like that is better than dunking it vertically because all the wax will stay in between those rollers. And it has taken 42 minutes and 54 seconds.
42. It was a tough assignment.
42?
Okay, so the waxing process is finished and I filtered my wax through this face mask here. This is the one good idea that I did nick from OzCycle. And as you can see, this is all the dirt that was inside that wax. So it was pretty dirty. And now this is hardened and can be removed. I'm not even sure, this might be reusable, but I've got lots of them, so I'm not going to bother. Here is all my wax now inside this container. It's certainly a lot cleaner than it was before. There's still a little bit of brown residue there, but like I say, it's a lot cleaner than it was, and that, as I say, can be reused, so that's good. Here is my waxing container. It's all cleaned out, so no debris in there. Here is my headset spacer that goes in the bottom. And here is my chain. You can just dump it out when you're ready. We have one quick link stuck here. So pop that off there. And here is the chain. If we flip it over, you can see how much wax there is on the underside. It's actually smooth with wax here. You can see that everything is completely rigid. It's completely solid with wax, and it's completely cooled down now as well. This is quite cold. It's been sitting in an aircon room for a while. So this now can be sort of curled up and put in your box for later.
The fastest way to break the chains in reality is putting it straight onto the bike and then just turning the gears so that the chain breaks in. And while you're doing that as well, if you have one of these chains with the hollow pins, you can poke out all the holes as they go by. It's a slow process, but you know, it's quicker than doing it on a table or something. And to catch the bits, you just put down plastic like this.
Okay folks, thanks for sticking with me all the way to this point. Let's do some conclusions and some myth busting from what I've found. So number one thing here is quieter shifting. Your shifting will be quieter if you wax. After you initially wax your chain, you've got a lot of buildup of wax that comes off all over your bike. and that clogs up the gaps between your teeth in your cassette. And what that causes is shifting issues. So you'll be going down the road, you'll try and shift gear, and you'll get to-tink, 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 because the thing's not shifting properly because that wax has clogged up your cassette. So you have to bring it home and scrape the wax out with something to eliminate that problem, or pull over the side of the road and scrape it out with your fingers if you can, or a pair of keys or something. Right, next one. It's cleaner. You can touch the chain with an oiled chain, right? Once you've freshly oiled your chain and your chain is clean from its wash, you give it a good wipe with a cloth and everything looks really, really clean. Your bike looks clean, your chain looks clean. It's not until you get riding a significant amount of distance that it starts to turn grey, and then dark grey, and then black, right? And then when it gets to that really gunky black look, you wash your bike, or you should be doing anyway. As a bike mechanic, I advise you to wash your bike regularly. When you wax a chain and you put that on your bike and you start riding, little bits of wax come off everywhere. So you've got little specks of white wax covering your rear derailleur, your front derailleur, your frame, your wheels, your spokes. Everything gets covered in little bits of wax. And so because a lot of things on a bike are black or dark, it shows up everywhere. So it looks like Christmas because all these little specks of white everywhere. You know, it looks like a Colombian's wet dream, a Colombian drug dealer's wet dream. It's just everywhere. So no, it's not cleaner. It's just a different kind of dirt. Now, after you've been riding a significant amount of time and you were to run your hand on an oiled chain, for whatever reason you would do that, I don't know. Well, it says, oh, you can touch the chain after you've been riding it. So if you've been riding an oil-based chain for a long time, yeah, if you touch it, you'll get an oily hand. Just don't touch it. With the wax chain, yeah, if it's early stages, if it's early days and you rub your hand on it, all you'll get is a bit of white. And if you're pasty like me, you won't see anything. But as you saw from my chain that had done 300 kilometers, if you rub that on your hands, like vigorously, you'll get a black mark. So you can't go around rubbing dirty wax chains and not expect to get something on your hand. Another thing is saves time. This is a complete and utter fallacy. It in no way saves time whatsoever. This is a much more lengthy process than oiling. I am definitely spending more time maintaining my bike now than I was when I was using oil. Simply because I'm still washing my bike the same amount. A lot of people say, oh, you don't need to wash your bike now because you're waxing. That's not true. As you can see from this, my bike still gets dirty even when I'm using wax. It still rains, still get mud on the road sometimes, still get road dirt. It's all going to stick to your bike. Just because you're not using oil anymore doesn't mean your bike's not going to get dirty. You still need to wash and maintain your bike, right? So I'm still washing my bike once a week. I'm saving about 10 minutes during the wash, because that 10 minutes during the wash, I'd be degreasing my chain and I would be degreasing my cassette and my jockey wheels and my chain rings, right? Just because previously with oil I'm scrubbing, like my cassette, for example, doesn't mean I don't scrub my cassette now I'm waxing. I still have to scrub the cassette because dirty wax builds up in the cassette. You still got to get that off. So you still have to vigorously scrub your componentry and clean them. Because if you don't, you'll get dirty wax resting on those drivetrain components. Sand and grit will get pushed into that wax. And then when you put your new wax chain on, you'll recontaminate everything. So you've still got to wash it. This idea of saving time is nonsense. I'm saving 10 minutes from the bike wash outside, and I'm adding, as you saw, like 45 minutes of waxing. And then on top of that, you've got to put that wax chain back on your bike, which requires you to break all those links, right? That takes another 10 minutes. So it's literally an hour. People say, oh, you just get a load of chains and you do a load of chains at once so that it's quicker, right? So you wax 3 chains in one go. That's still an hour. I'm still spending the same hour re-waxing those 3 chains and breaking all the links in those chains. And for me, it takes even longer because I'm a weight weenie. So I like lightweight bikes. And so I spend a lot of money buying lightweight chains that have lots of holes in them. And because those chains have got a lot of holes in them, I'm having to poke out each individual hole with a toothpick, which takes bloody forever. And then you've got the cleanup time of all that wax all over the floor. Saving time? Rubbish. Absolute hogwash. Save money. Okay, this is where that 3 chains thing comes in. So a lot of people say, oh, you're going to save money because waxing is cheap. It's not. Like, you've got the initial investment is higher. All the stuff that I need to use this, like my sponges and my soap and my degreaser and my bucket, you know, and my brushes, I still need if I'm waxing the chain. I don't need to buy that very, very cheap oil. What I do need to buy is $20 worth of waxing equipment and, you know, every now and again, a bunch of candles, which is still about the same price as this oil. If you then want to do the whole waxing saves time because you can do multiple chains at once malarkey, then you've got to get yourself 3 chains or 4 chains, right? How much is that going to cost you? Now, if you're strapped for cash, right, and you can only afford 1 chain at a time, you might as well stick with this. Because otherwise, like I say, you're going to be waxing the same chain for an hour every week, basically, if you want to do it properly. Let's say it only takes you 30 minutes to wax the chain. If you're really good at this, that's still an additional 30 minutes per week that you wouldn't be doing if you were just using oil. If you're a successful business owner, and you know, you can make a lot of money in an hour's work, right? Maybe you can make $200-300 in an hour. What's the point in you trying to save a few dollars on a bike chain by waxing it when you're only going to have to replace your bike chain once every 6 months? Financially, it doesn't make sense. If you could make more money in that hour that you would have spent waxing than it costs to buy a new chain, then it costs to buy a new chain, then why bother, right? It's financially, it's not pertinent to do that. If you're retired and you've got nothing better to do, or you're a YouTuber, then you've got time to wax a chain, and more power to you. It's actually a lot of fun, I must admit. Waxing a chain is fun. And I say, if you're a kid, you're probably riding around on a cheap bike, like I was. If you're riding around on Sora or Tawny 8-speed or something, how much does a chain cost you? Like 50, 20 at most? You can make that in a month, no problem. And you're not changing your chain, even with oil, with the contamination of oil, you're not changing your chain every month. So, save money, absolutely not. Oh, don't forget as well, energy costs. So I'm boiling a kettle, which I didn't have to do when I was oiling. And you got your hot pot, if you are doing it the hot pot way, right? Running that thing for an hour, it's going to cost you some energy. Or me, I'm using gas. So if you have a gas burner at home, you're going to be using gas. That's adding to your gas and your electric bill. If you live in Europe, your energy prices are massive. So you're adding all of that to your monthly costs additionally, where again, I need no electricity in order to oil my chain. To wash my bike and oil my chain, all I need is water and degreaser and the oil. That's it. Chain life, like people talk about the extended chain life. Okay, so let's assume that that's true. Like people say anything from 3 times more chain life. Here's the thing, who are they comparing with? Because Shimano on one of these websites I read said that you should be looking at about 3 chains per cassette, right? So every time you wear out 3 chains, you should need to change your cassette because your cassette is worn out. If you put a 4th chain, a new chain on that cassette, it will start slipping, right? When it starts to slip, you know that your cassette is worn out. With me, because I wash my bike every week and I've always used oil and I've always been thorough in my washing, you guys have probably seen my bike wash videos, how thorough I am. I get 6 chains per cassette. So my chains are not wearing out that fast, and my cassettes certainly aren't wearing out that fast. If you compare waxing with me, oil and regular cleaning, how much more efficient is it with regards to the life of your chain? Probably not that much. I think what people are comparing with when you've got your very meticulous chain waxing people, and what they're doing is comparing them with your average commuter cyclist who hardly ever washes their bike. I've got customers who I literally see once every year or two, and when they bring me their bike, it's oiled, of course, it's never been cleaned. Like, I'm the only person that ever washes that bike, and I see them like once a year. Seriously. So every time I meet them, I'm like, chain checker, yeah, you need a new chain, you need a new cassette, you need new chain rings. And they're always like, oh my God, I just replaced them, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yeah, because you don't wash your bike. Okay, so if you wash your bike, if you maintain your bike, if you keep your bike clean as possible, yes, this might not be as good as waxing, but the difference is minimal. Right, faster. So people say, oh, you'll go faster on a wax chain. From what I read, it's about 2 to 5 watts faster. 5 watts being the best case scenario, 2 watts being your average, I guess. Let's think about that for a moment. 2 watts is like tidying the cables on your bike. You'll get 2 watts. You'll get like 15 watts just switching from a butyl tube to a TPU tube, which doesn't cost you any extra time. When you wax a chain fresh and put it on your bike, it's less efficient than an oil-based chain, right? You've got a new, freshly oiled, well-oiled chain that's just been cleaned, and you've got your new waxed chain on your bike. If you race those two guys together for half an hour, the wax chain will be less efficient than the oil-based chain, okay, for that entire half an hour period, right? Now, most bike races that I've done are anywhere from like 1 hour, like say 50 kilometers or something, to 100 kilometers, a couple of hours, right, if you're moving really quick. So for the first 30 minutes of all those races, even if the race is only 30 minutes long, you're going to be less efficient than an oil-based chain. After that 30-minute period, you'll be neck and neck with the oil-based chain. And then slowly over time, as the oil-based chain gets dirtier, you will pass the oil-based chain and you'll become slightly more efficient up to a point of maybe 2 watts, even though you've lost watts all the way through the race up until that point. What a lot of people say, what waxers say is, well, what you do is you wax your chain the day before, then you put it on your bike and you go for a bike ride for half an hour. And then you break the chain in, so then you're working at maximum efficiency before you start the race. Okay, great. So you go for a bike ride with your freshly washed bike and your freshly waxed chain out on the street, and you pick up a bunch of dirt on your bike and on your chain. And then what? You come home and you wash your bike again? Or you re-wax your chain, but now you've re-waxed your chain, you've got to go for another bike ride to make your chain efficient for the next day's. Hang on a minute, this doesn't make sense. Oh no, hang on a minute. What you do is you buy a second bike, you put it on an indoor trainer, and then every time you wax your chain, you put the chain on the indoor trainer and you do a half an hour hard session on the indoor trainer to make sure that your chain is efficient for the next day's race.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
So for me, I've really noticed the difference in how draggy the wax chain is initially, whereas I never get that problem with the oil-based chain. Bad weather, oil, every time. Now, I've had some experience with this. I've ridden through floods with my wax chain, and I've ridden in the rain with my wax chain, and it hasn't rusted. And the reason why it hasn't rusted is because during those rides, I got the chain wet early in the ride, and then I was doing quite a long ride. I was doing like 120 kilometers, and the chain dried out during the ride from just usage and being in the sun after the rain stopped. And so when I got home, my chain was dry. So I didn't have to worry about rusting. So I just hung the bike up and walked away from it. If it was really, really bad weather and I got absolutely drenched and I came home with a very wet bike, I'd spin off the chain, I'd add a little bit of oil to it, and I'd walk away from it so that my chain wouldn't rust. And then I can clean it in a day or two's time when I need to. With the wax chain, what you have to do, supposedly, if it gets wet, is remove it from the bike, shake it off, and immediately wax it to prevent it from rusting, okay? Now, if you do that every time you get wet and you live in the UK,
Ain't nobody got time for that.
You're going to be waxing your chain an awful lot. Imagine if you wax your chain on Monday and then on Tuesday you get soaked. You got to wax it on Tuesday as well. Mind-boggling. The other advantage of using oil in adverse weather conditions, not just that you can easily top it up on your journey if you carry some oil with you, not just that when you get home it's a very easy job to top it up when you get home, not just that it's an easier job to clean the chain if you decide to clean the chain immediately, but if you use oil, this oil spreads around. It gets places, okay? It gets unexpected places. What I find is that when I oil my chain, all my derailleur hinges, right, all the pivots on my derailleurs get oiled a little bit as well. And it stops my derailleurs from rusting. What I've noticed since I switched to wax is that there's nothing going on to those pivots and those other points of my drivetrain. It's not protecting them. So I've had to go around my drivetrain with a lightweight oil, not this one, but a different one, and just add a little drop every here and there to prevent my drivetrain from corroding in what I live in, which is high humidity. So if you use oil, you're actually protecting more than just your chain. You're protecting your entire drivetrain. Also, now when I wash my bike, my cassette rusts immediately because, you know, it's only surface rust. It's not a big deal. You know, it just looks ugly. But, you know, when I bring the cassette in, I'm not putting anything on it because I can't afford to contaminate my wax. It's easy. No. And waxing is fun, I will say that. But there are lots of people out there who are not like me, who do not enjoy cleaning, who do not enjoy meticulous tasks, who do not enjoy the additional brain power it requires to do this, because you have to be a certain type of person to wax your chain.
Imagine a guy with no elan, no style, a misfit.
So this is really me? A no-style gimbo with teeth the Druids could use as a place of worship?
So I've got all the time in the world to sit around going, oh, time to play with wax. Oh, yes. So yeah, if you're retired, if you've got nothing better to do, if you've got all the time in the world, wax your chain. If you're young and you don't have time and you've got a cheap drivetrain, it's not worth your time. If you're a successful business owner and your time is valuable to you, then no, definitely not. Nothing essentially wrong with it. I'm not going to say don't wax. I'm not going to say don't try it. Go out and try it. But it's not what it's cracked up to be, quite frankly. So if you enjoyed today's video, remember, do like and subscribe. Do hit the like button, the notification button, share with a friend, all that good stuff. And as always, folks, when you're out riding, please do stay safe. And I shall see you in the next video. Bye-bye.